Sheldon approaches Tommy under the premise of conducting a sociological study on aggression. He corners Tommy in the school restroom and uses clinical logic to analyze the bully's behavior. Disarmed by the boy's lack of fear and superior vocabulary, Tommy apologizes and grants Sheldon his protection. This unexpected alliance shifts the power dynamic of the school. Sheldon begins to exploit his new status, treating Georgie like a servant and demanding favors under the threat of Tommy's intervention. His ego expands until he decides to challenge Jason, the most violent bully on campus. Sheldon believes his intellect can neutralize any physical threat. He spends his time constructing an air-based weapon designed to launch projectiles using instantaneous air pressure. He views this device as a scientific upgrade to the biblical David's sling. Sheldon confronts Jason on the basketball court in front of a crowd of students. He puts on safety goggles and delivers a calculated speech about David and Goliath. He aims the weapon and fires a direct shot. The projectile strikes Jason in the forehead. The hit is accurate, but the force is insufficient to incapacitate the larger teenager. The crowd goes silent as the reality of violence overrides the logic of physics. Jason does not back down. He charges. Sheldon attempts to flee, but he lacks the physical stamina to escape. Jason catches him and forces him into a dark metal locker. Sheldon is left imprisoned inside for the entire night, realizing that a high IQ provides no defense against a locked door and a superior reach.
Pastor Jeff falls ill, leaving Mary Cooper to manage the church's daily operations. She begins with a marriage counseling session for the Walkers. While they describe their elaborate dates, Mary observes the husband's physical tension. She skips the pleasantries and identifies the problem. The stress of running a flower shop has destroyed their physical intimacy. The couple sits in silence as a housewife solves a private crisis with blunt common sense. Mary then visits James Guilford, an elderly shut-in living in a house filled with trash and old newspapers. Guilford greets her with immediate hostility, mocking her religious views and demanding she leave. They argue over a meal of fried chicken and gravy. Mary leaves, angered by his bitterness. Later, Pastor Jeff reveals the truth. Guilford is a decorated war hero, a former Army lieutenant who survived combat only to be forgotten by his neighbors. Mary returns to Guilford's home to make amends, but finds the door unlocked. The television is loud. Guilford is dead in his armchair, having passed away alone in the squalor. On Sunday, Mary stands at the pulpit. She ignores the standard liturgy and tells the congregation exactly who lived among them. She reveals his rank, his 45-year marriage, and his service to the country. She points out their collective neglect. She demands the community help clean the house he died in and show up for his burial. Mary transforms a forgotten death into a public reckoning, forcing the town to face the man they chose to ignore.
Mary informs George that Veronica Duncan needs a place to sleep. Her mother's boyfriend, Clint, has a drinking problem that has turned violent. George listens, finishes his beer, and agrees to let the girl stay. The peace is short-lived. Clint arrives at the Cooper house under the cover of night. He is loud and demands Veronica's immediate return. When Veronica refuses to leave, the situation escalates. George's eldest son, Georgie, steps forward to defend the girl. Clint reacts with immediate aggression, grabbing the boy by his collar and slamming him against the doorframe. George Sr. hears the commotion and enters the hallway. He does not yell. He simply moves his large frame into the space between his son and the intruder. George looks Clint in the eye and asks if he truly wants to proceed with a fight. The physical disparity is immediate. George is a high school football coach with a massive build. Clint is a smaller, intoxicated man. Clint attempts to maintain his bravado, but George doesn't give him the floor. He uses his physical weight to drive Clint out the front door and onto the porch. The confrontation ends with a single, decisive shove. George returns to the kitchen, calmly adjusting his shirt. He tells Mary to call the police to report a vagrant on their property. The threat is neutralized not through a speech, but through a calculated display of superior force. George returns to his evening, having established a clear boundary. His home is closed to Clint, and his children are off limits. Mary discovers a comic book with adult themes in Sheldon's room and confiscates his entire collection. Sheldon objects, claiming he is no longer a child. They reach a formal agreement. From this moment on, Mary will treat him as a self-sufficient adult. She ceases all mothering duties immediately. No more laundry, no prepared meals, and no protection. Sheldon's attempt at adult life begins in the kitchen. He cooks his own dinner, but the food is tainted with the taste of dish soap. At night, he sits alone in the dark, refusing the comfort of a bedtime kiss. The reality of independence becomes a series of logistical hurdles. He lacks the physical strength to open a jar of preserves. When a school field trip requires a parent's signature, Mary refuses, stating that independent adults do not need their mothers to sign forms. Driven by a need to fund his Harvard application, Sheldon walks into a Radio Shack to apply for a job. The manager dismisses him instantly. With no other options, Sheldon resorts to manual labor, weeding his grandmother's garden for $1 an hour. He remains outside, pulling grass, even as the tornado sirens begin to wail. He refuses to seek shelter, determined to prove his autonomy. The tornado hits. The family huddles in the dark bathroom as the wind screams. The house shakes. Amidst the chaos, Sheldon hears his mother praying for their survival. The bravado of independence vanishes. He reaches out and firmly grips Mary's hand. Sheldon realizes that while he has the mind of a man, he still requires the shelter of a mother.